This Dr. Al, looking at some photos and with some poems. And you'll be looking at two photos today. Both feature Verl Garland Maple, who died in action February 8, 1944, shortly after takeoff from his base at Berciano, Italy, where he was a navigator in the 726th Bomber Squadron of the 451st Bombardment Group of the United States Army Air Force. The group photo that you see, sort of, includes his two sisters plus their cousins from an extended family of Griffins and No-Days who had assembled to spend time with him before he left for overseas duty. My mother is to his left in this photo, which I think gives you also a better picture, better image of him as well. Garland had graduated from Guthrie High School in 1940, spent a year at the University of Oklahoma, and then began work in defense industries in Oregon. While in high school, he had written a short story depicting one Jean Lavere, a young idealistic French soldier from the First World War. Lavere survived the horrors of the Western Front to return to the city he had known and loved, now, quote, a Paris of jumbled rock and stone, ruled edifices, and matted jungles. Lavere wandered through the city for days, questioning, was it for this he had suffered, starved, and bled? He then ended his life leaping from a ruined bridge. As did hundreds of thousands of young Americans, Garland enlisted in the Army the day after Pearl Harbor. While still in training, his older sister visited a fortune teller on a lark, but heard the disturbing news that she would soon lose someone precious to her. She relayed that to her mother, who told her it was almost certainly referred to Garland. As that event approached, however, Garland was thinking about buying a quarter section of land he had helped for near the family farm, promising his grandfather that the first bomb he helped drop would have his name on it, and writing that, quote, he was in the big leagues now and plenty anxious for my time at bat, to get it over with and then return home. Instead, his plane crashed upon takeoff for his first mission, the crash setting off a series of explosions that lasted for more than an hour from the bombs it carried. Later reports from men in his unit explained the crash as the work of a saboteur. The military records which have been processed, there are some that have not been completed, attribute the crash to pilot error and icing of a carburetor, however. His family received the usual regrets and assurances that his sacrifice would be remembered by a grateful nation. In fact, he has been largely forgotten. The memorial listing losses from his hometown originally had his name wrong, and records maintained by the state of Oklahoma linked him to the wrong town and county. His immediate family and the girlfriend who wrote his sister for the next 50 years are all dead, as are most of his high school compatriots and the few people he served with. There may be a few of those who may recall him, as would three of the cousins that were depicted in that picture you saw originally, and one who was not from the Chapel family. Most of them, the rest, along with my mother and Garland's older sister, have died. Some of their children, my sister and our cousins, know these and other photos from his life, but never really met him. I, in fact, had seen him through the eyes of an infant born a few months prior to the visit depicted in these photos. In all likelihood, Verl Garland Maple's life, service, and death will be forgotten completely within another generation. The same will also be true for the vast majority of his cohorts. Even the most grateful nation cannot really remember almost 500,000 individuals who died, especially as their number has continued to grow in decades since with the additional wars. And even close families usually lose their connections to the past within a few decades. We're left instead with Abraham Lincoln's words after the Battle of Gettysburg, "We must resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain." Or as Garland might have phrased it in his short story, "We must be sure that our veterans should be able to see evidence that the values and freedom they fought for have been preserved, that they have not been, it was not in vain. It was worth it. I did not write a poem about Garland. Instead, I want to quote from one I wrote reflecting on the meaning of memorials in general and the sacrifices of those who preceded us and blessed us in the living as well as their dying. The concluding stanzas of that poem reads, "Words carved in stone imply what might have been had the life been lived instead of given. But folks in these parts know those who will not die cannot save, and all else is held only till the wind blows it away."